Hey guys, a fascinating game today. We have almost crossed the finish line of this match. Gukesh Damaraju versus Liren, and today is the penultimate round, round 13, and one of the longest, if not the longest games of the match occurred. Very tough, very tense battle. You will enjoy it. And just to remind you, Gukesh is playing with the white pieces, and yesterday, or rather like 2 days ago, he has suffered a painful loss, but before that he had dealt a similarly painful loss to Din, so they are on equal terms in the match, 6 points each. But there is a significant factor that plays a role. Din is much stronger in Rapid and Blitz than Gukesh, so if the two remaining games end in draws, or if one is a win for one person and the other is a loss, then the match is tied, 7 against 7. And the match goes to tiebreaks, where Din is a heavy favorite because Gukesh just seems to be not as strong in Rapid and Blitz as he is in Classical. So Din is relying on this fact. He wants just to make 2 draws and play tiebreaks. And Gukesh is relying on the fact that he's playing with the white pieces in this game and wants to press for a win. And this time he opts for one e4. Again for the 3rd time in the match, and Liren does not shy away from my beloved French defense. Again e6 for the 3rd time in the match. And here we have a similar position to what happened in game 1, which Liren won with the black pieces. And the only difference here is that white goes a3, which is a weird move. Why should you move your a pawn here? Previously, there was a position like this that was played between players, and there was a5, a4 by Din, and Gukesh went crazy with g4 and eventually got outplayed and lost this game. So this time he's changing his strategy, and here already Din entered into a deep think. Obviously, he knew some lines here because a3 is a move, even though it's not the most common move. But he somehow didn't know what to do, thought about it for some time, and like for close to 20 minutes, and went bishop e7, which is one of the logical moves, but actually not the most common one. The engine likes f6 here, but there are some crazy lines after knight f4 attacking this pawn. For example, there are lines like takes, queen b6. So the knight here is very annoying, but it turns out that black is okay. And there are many other crazy lines, so probably Din wanted to avoid them because Din wants to make a draw and get one step closer to tiebreaks. Then he will just have to make a draw tomorrow, and he will be a heavy favorite. But okay, let's see what he did. He went for bishop e7, a logical developing move. Now bishop e3 is the move chosen by Gukesh. He is still in his prep. He's playing almost instantly, and Din again thinks for some time and goes knight b6. Actually, he thinks for 40 minutes almost, which is, yeah, a significant time spending habit for him in this match. He very often gets into time trouble. Will this strategy work out for him this time? Strategy of spending much time in the opening, we will see. But knight b6 is not the most precise move according to the engine. The engine wants Din to repeat his strategy from the previous matches, to go a5, maybe b5. Instead, Din wants to put the knight on c4, which is a great square for the knight currently because this bishop is not controlling it. The knight on a2 is blocking this square, so this is the idea. But knight f4 jumps in, and now the bishop is controlling this square. And if you hear some roaring sounds in the background, these are my dogs, so I hope they're not bothering you too much. Guys, please, don't be so loud. So takes, resolving some tension in the center, and still Din goes for knight c4. Notice the time difference. Din is already down 1 hour, so it's a scary position for him also because white just takes, and yes, black has a dark squared bishop and white has none, but the engine gives a significant advantage to white because this light squared bishop, the so-called French bishop, is bad. This king is weak. If it castles this way, it's going to get in trouble because queen g4 will come. And actually, this is the move that is like the engine screams that you should go queen g4. And I watched some commentary including in English and in Russian. Yan Nepomniachtchi in Russian said that queen g4 is an automatic move, you should make it immediately. Probably Gukesh simply did not consider it, because this attacks the pawn. If you castle, then knight h5 potentially comes, and this is very dangerous. Or other moves, but knight f3 first, also suggested by the engine. If you go g6 to prevent knight h5 for the time being, then your dark squares around your king are rather weak, and white has a great attack. White will be able to go knight f3 for example, and yeah, white enjoys a great position. So this would be even better than what happened in the game, queen g4, but Gukesh also chose a sensible approach. He developed the knight, now he castled, and he attacked the pawn with the knight. So both knights are jumping, are active, and white is better. White is better. In the French, this is always often the case. So there are some trumps in the position for black as well, but white has more space and better pieces mostly. Rook b8 defends this pawn. Knight h5 is a motif similar to what I already showed you. Queen g4 is coming probably. So one way to combat this is king h8, the engine move. The second line of the engine is f5, also very good, preventing the queen from going to g4 from attacking. And here it was Gukesh who went into a deep think. So he thought for 40 minutes on his next move. And he finally decided to take en passant. You probably know this chess rule. But this is not the only move that comes to mind. On streams, various commentators were discussing d5. A pawn break in the center, very logical, and after takes, you can take by the knight, but it seems that taking by the queen is better. Check, you should take, and this is the position. And white has a very, very nice knight on d5. Also, white has some center activity. This pawn is never really hanging, because if you take it, this will be hanging on g7. So the position is a little bit more pleasant for white, but once the engine runs on a higher depth, it says that it's all right, it's nothing too special, it should be a draw. So d5 was another move that probably Gukesh was considering. Instead, he took en passant, which is the top engine choice. And top choice of me was adopting a couple of dogs. Now they participate in my recaps sometimes. If you don't see, you should see this guy. This is Fenya. So okay, let's continue with the recap. En passant, obviously black takes back, and you can take the bishop now, but then the queen will be able to take. So instead, first Gukesh goes queen f3, attacking this knight. Sorry for my arrows. Queen e8 defends this knight, but now he takes, and now the queen will no longer be able to take on f6. So black takes with the rook, attacking the queen. Now Gukesh drops back. Queen g6, activating the queen. Now the position is close to equal, but this bishop is still bad. It's seeing this pawn on e6, but this bishop is also kind of bad. So yeah, a little bit better structure for white. And some activity connected with d5 break potentially, but it looks like Dean is doing a good job of navigating his way towards the draw. Or is he? f3, nice move, prophylactical move, actually a top engine line. These pawns are serving potentially as a barrier to the light squared bishop of black if black wants to develop to b7. For the time being, by the way, this is not possible because this pawn would need to be protected for this to happen, but maybe sometime in future. So rook f5, for example, is a move that's suggested by the engine to then go bishop b7 probably. But instead, Dean goes back, rook f8, a little bit passive. And here, both sides have already 35 minutes to make 20 moves. So time pressure is an important factor in this game. You will see later. So rook d1, preparing to push d5 probably in future. Knight d7, preparing to take control of this square. Bishop f4, a brilliant move. You might ask, what if the rook takes? This bishop is not defended. Well, then, nice geometry of the board. Queen e5 is a fork, and you cannot defend both rooks. So bishop f4 is a move that I think if you see it, you like it, you do it, but I wouldn't consider it from afar. At least it's not obvious that you can just hand your bishop like that, but it's a great move. So rook b6, And now bishop c7, the bishop is harassing this rook. It needs like a cease and desist order because it's like not letting this rook go anywhere. Rook b7. Now this b7 square, which could be useful for the bishop, is occupied by this rook. On the other hand, this rook is serving the purpose of defense, so it's not that bad for black. Bishop d6, but this is an annoying pin, and Gukesh is really outplaying Dean Liren. He's outplaying him on the board, he's outplaying him on the clock. Dean has now 20 minutes to make 16 moves, a little bit more than 1 minute per move. And this bishop is still bad, the light squared bishop, it's still not developed. So white's position is better, and the engine gives a significant plus to white. Rook a8, sidestepping this pin by the bishop. Potentially now the knight can rotate like this. And here, a committal decision by Gukesh. He decides to take this knight, which is a good move, but not the best one according to the engine. The engine suggests rook e1, putting more pressure here. But probably Gukesh didn't like the knight activating, but then you can just go bishop c5 or bishop b4, and your bishop is much better than this bishop, the light squared bishop. So we have a case of opposite colored bishops, which usually favor the attacking side. If you know this, then you know some things about chess. Congrats. So this is a configuration Gukesh should have opted for, but what he did was also perfectly fine. So he took on e7. And he has now a different configuration, a good knight versus a bad bishop, because this bishop is bad. Many of black's pawns are on light squares, preventing the bishop from having a better scope. White's pawns are also preventing the bishop from having any attacking prospects. So the knight is much better because it can jump around the position, it can go to d6, it can attack. So white is still better, but white could be even more better than in this position had he not traded the bishop for the knight, but that would have been a different story. Still, the game goes on and is far from over. It's just 25 moves into the game. Can you guess how many more moves the game lasted? Well, I think you will guess incorrectly, but let us see. So queen e5, putting more pressure. The queen is centralized. You should usually, if the queen is not in danger of getting harassed by enemy pieces, you should centralize your queen. This is a good rule of thumb, because when the queen is in the center of the board, it sees the whole board, it sees lots of squares, because it sees in all directions, so it's controlling lots of squares. Chess lesson for you. Also here, the queen on e5 prevents black from moving e5, so usually queens are not good blockaders, but here this will do. This pawn was hanging, so a6 was necessary to defend it. And now d5, Finally, Gukesh decided to strike in the center. On the one hand, you may say, why do you go d5? Because, this pawn, if black takes, then this bishop has some scope, so this weak pawn will be annihilated. On the other hand, there are some practical considerations why this is a good move, according to the engine as well. So black takes, you take with check. So now the king is weak. Now you can potentially infiltrate like this. There are many opportunities for white. Black tries to exchange the queens, because if we exchange the queens, you can take by the bishop, and yes, the pressure continues. Rook d8, for example, and white is still a little bit better. Knight e4, threatening this, but black should hold on to a draw here. Instead of trading immediately, queen c5 was the move chosen by Gukesh. He tries to preserve as many pieces on the board as possible, because this would give him more winning chances. Because if you have a queen on the board, you are kind of more likely to checkmate your opponent. And now he wants to probably go rook d8 check and continue harassing the king, then jump in with the knight like this. There are many ways how this game could go wrong. And already engine on high depth gives a practically +1 advantage to white. So the position is very bad for black because of this stupid bishop, and because the king is weak, and because this rook on b7 is a little bit ugly placed. So yeah, and the knight could be very strong for white. White is dominating. So rook e8, making sure that the 8th rank is covered from checks by the rook. Now rook e1, and here the engine suggests for black trading the queen for 2 rooks, which practically maybe would be a good decision for Dean if he wanted to play for 3 results, to play for a win or a draw, or to be able to lose this game as well, because this can like end up anything can happen in this game, because white has a queen, black has two rooks, and a bishop for a knight, another imbalance. The knight wants to go here. There are many ways to proceed here, and it's a very double-edged position. Dean decides not to risk it. Instead of giving up the queen for two rooks, which is objectively, by the way, materially an equal exchange, but it creates a huge imbalance on the board. He does not want any imbalances. He wants to be safe, so he sidesteps. But this is an inaccuracy. Now, white can take on e8 and get a practically winning position. Queen e8, knight e4. The fork would be threatened. So the best move according to the engine is to sidestep with a queen, like queen d8 or queen d7, doesn't really matter. But then knight d6, attacking the rook and the bishop. If you go here, then queen d5 is very bad with check. The best move is rook d7, but still queen d5 check. You cannot go here because I check you like this, and it's game over very soon. If you take here, I take here. So actually, like this. This is what the engine wants. Check like this, and then what does the engine want? It wants to repeat. Well, it's classic engines. Never mind. It wants to check like this, and if the king goes here, rook e1 is the move. Yeah, and this is winning. If you take like this, then queen d6 seals the deal. Yeah, obviously. Well, I thought Gukesh would find this from afar. I didn't initially spot this, to be honest. But yeah, intuitively speaking, you can understand that this is a dangerous position for black. So I don't know why Gukesh did not take on e8 here. So this would lead to close to a winning advantage, but time pressure is a factor also. Gukesh has to make 10 moves in 13 minutes, so he decided to keep more pieces on the board. So he went knight e4 instead of trading the rooks, and now he no longer has a winning advantage, but he still has an advantage, because all the factors that I already mentioned remain in place. Rook f8 is a great move, by the way, the only move to keep the balance here, because all other moves hand some material and lose. For example, if you go rook c7, attacking the queen, then there is a beautiful knight f6 check. And whatever you take with, you lose. If you take by the queen, you lose the rook on e8. If you take by the pawn, I take here with check, I take here, because this is not longer protected. So knight f6 would be great. So rook c7 loses because of this. If you go, for example, rook d8, then knight d6 is a fork, and you lose some material. So the only move here after knight e4 to not lose for black, Liren finds it, rook f8. Undeveloping the rook, well, not undeveloping technically, because this is a semi-open file, but this is a rather paradoxical move. Probably Gukesh missed it, because now, after knight d6, with a similar fork, black has a reply, rook c7, attacking the queen. If your queen is attacked, you don't have to retreat. You can counterattack the queen of your opponent. And if you take, I will take, and this will be an equal endgame. So, of course, white does not take. Instead, white goes queen e5, trying to still put pressure. Now, black's queen is still hanging, queen f6. Black wants to trade. No trade for you, says Gukesh. It's a check. Now, Dean has 4 minutes to make the remaining 6 moves. Will he be able to make good moves? King h8 is like automatic. Okay, this is not difficult. Now, rook e5. Gukesh wants to double up, probably put more pressure, infiltrate. Rook e7. Still, Dean insists, trade with me, trade pieces with me, make a draw. Rook e1. Okay, says Gukesh, I can trade, but on my terms. We trade, and still the open file belongs to white. h6, an important prophylactical move, best move according to the engine, creating loot for the king to escape from some annoying checks. Now, queen c5 is a good move, technically maybe not the only move, or not the best move, but a logical move, putting pressure on the c8 bishop. The bishop develops to d7. Now Dean has, well, practically 3 minutes to make 2 remaining moves. Will he do it? Knight e4, attacking the queen. Where does the queen go? Actually, there are not too many good squares for the queen to go to. For example, if queen f7, rook e7 immediately wins. If queen, let's say, d8, then rook d5. Very annoying pin, and black is close to losing, because white is threatening to take, and then to take the rook. And rook f7 is the only move, but now, like, white will continue putting more pressure, and it's very, very, very dangerous. So the queen is hanging. What should you do? If you are Dean Liren, you have like 3 minutes on the clock. You should find, of course, the best top engine move, queen f4, which is not that difficult actually, I think, for any strong player. A very logical move. You want to infiltrate with the queen, threaten some checks, maybe some perpetual checks, maybe some counterattack to turn the game around, because if Dean wins this game, then he will only need a draw in the last round to secure the title, and if he wants to play for a draw with the white pieces, it will be very difficult for Gukesh to get that win and to come back. So Gukesh should consider the possibility that if he's risking too much, he can lose. Should he risk, or should he make a draw? I don't know what's going on through his head at this time, but finally he makes the decision to risk it. And you will see how it paid off or didn't. Rook e7, trying to go for activity, to go for some checkmating ideas. Bishop f5, now both sides have made the time control. Now they get an extra 30 minutes added to the clock of each of the participants. Queen d4, the threat is simple. Checkmate in one move on g7 with the queen. Black has to defend rook g8. This rook is like a very, very important employee that's doing all the dirty job. It used to be on e8, then it went to f8, then to g8. It's just protecting everything like in a very, very reserved, calm, and collected fashion. And for the time being, it's doing a great job, even though it's a very passive rook. So it's not like a star. It's not like those CEOs of startups in artificial intelligence or crypto that are saying things that they will reinvent the wheel, they will like create the future. This rook is not saying anything. It's just doing its job, but it's doing it really reliably. So h3, also making loot for the king. Potentially queen c1 check. So potentially, of course, white can go here, but then queen f4 back, and a perpetual check would probably be not a good outcome for Gukesh. So Gukesh goes forward. King f2. Is not afraid, even though the king is vulnerable to many bad things here. So finally, the bad bishop is traded for the good knight, and we have an equal position. But to make a draw in an equal position is an art that is yet to be mastered by many chess players, including myself. I've lost many of the drawn positions, even dead drawn. So will Dean make a draw, or will maybe he play for a win now that his bad bishop is gone and white has a weak king? c3, a very, very precise move to equalize, because if we trade the queens here, then it will be a dead draw, rook c8, and yeah, it's just it's never going to help white. These two pawns very, very weak. So instead of trading the queens here, white decides to take with a pawn. But now black takes the a pawn, and suddenly black is the one who could be potentially playing for a win, because black has an outside passed pawn. And if white manages to checkmate black, of course, the pawn will not help. Will white manage to do this? Let's go. King g3. King g3. So queen b3 is the move chosen by Dean Liren. He wants to control the e6 square, because otherwise there could be an idea of the rook going to e6 to both put pressure on a6 and threaten this. For example, if black does this, rook e6, and if black neglects this idea, this is a checkmate, because the pawn is pinned to the king. Obviously, that wouldn't have happened. Queen b3 is a useful move for black. Rook e7, going back, trying to put pressure over here, and maybe go behind the pawns and try to attack them and win them, and get a 3 versus 2 endgame. With queens on, there are practical chances to win this, of course. So a5, he pushes the pawn, rook b7. As I said, Gukesh goes behind the pawns, queen c4. A very clever move, because if you take and you think, I can win your pawn, well, you can, but actually rook a8, takes, goes here, goes back. White is in time to stop this pawn, and white has an extra pawn, but it doesn't matter. Rook c8, and then you'll trade this pawn for that pawn, and 3 on 2 in a rook endgame is a dead draw. Even I probably could have drawn this against Gukesh. I hope, because if I manage to lose this, I would get criticized by my coach, I think. So of course, Gukesh does not trade. Instead, he goes queen e5, maintaining some pressure. He's pressuring this pawn. He doesn't want to trade the queens. He's ready to get an endgame with an extra pawn, but with queens on. But queen c6. The queen is pressuring this rook, and if you take here, then a4 comes, and this pawn will be marching forward. So here Gukesh says, I've had enough. He takes the pawn. He decides he gets a check. And Din is very confident that he can draw this endgame. He offers this trade, and they get this trade, and this trade occurs, and there are several more moves that happen on the board, and I did not even enter them, and I already started filming the recap before the game ended, but now I'm checking the game, and yes, they did agree to a draw after a couple more moves, because yes, these top guys, they don't need to play it out. You just cannot do anything. Well, suppose you can somehow go back, let's say make some meaningless moves, and go back, and somehow you, I don't know, you protect this pawn by your rook, because you need your king to move then away from that g2 pawn, like this. I don't know, king h3. You can probably go h5, but black will probably go h5 themselves. And then black will just wait. And if white pushes, then black will happily trade. And this will be a 2-on-1, another draw. And you can just stand idly and do nothing. And if white pushes once again, it will be 1-on-0, which is a dead draw. And you can never make progress. Even with an f and h pawn, with 2 pawns up, these endgames are usually drawn. So instead of playing this until the very bitter end, both parties agreed to a draw, and we have a fascinating situation, because 1 round to go, the score is equal, and probably Din is already a heavy favorite. Probably, maybe not for the first time in the match, but now I think many people who said that Din is like the underdog, Gukesh is a favorite, many people like this will change their mind. What do you think? What's your opinion? Write it in the comments, and see you in the next one. Bye bye. I'll go get my dogs and walk with them.